Welcome to the Wellness Pulse with Monica Stevens. From CPR to self care, staying in rhythm with your well being. Thanks for tuning in. Good day, good day. I've got Cia McClinton here. How are you today?
I'm well. What about you?
I'm also well. For all our viewers out there who don't know, this is one of my favorite women,
I hope so. I certainly hope so.
my
And you are
Maxie
one of
D.
you are one of my favorites as well.
Right, the favorite, my Maxie. But anywho, we won't talk about that now. We're going to go ahead and indulge those about a little bit of CPR history. So, Miss Cia, why don't you tell me how long have you been in the CPR business?
In the CPR business, I actually have been in business since 2009, but I've been teaching CPR for over 35 years.
Do you remember, were you in school or your first exposure to CPR? How did you come to even knowing what CPR was?
Well, as a teenager, I worked at a nursing home when I was 16 years old. And I knew about CPR from that experience. We did not have to be trained in the CPR, however. So fast forward, you know, 2, 3 years later, I actually had to take CPR for school. In the respiratory therapy program, we actually had to have CPR, of course, to be able to do our clinicals.
Do you remember that class? Do you remember the mannequin? Did you guys use a Rescue Annie?
Well, I'll have to be honest and tell you that I do not remember the class. And that is why I think it's so important that a class is memorable, and enjoyable so that the person remembers the class and the content. So now, what actually happened is I was working for someone else also. Okay. And I needed to have CPR for them as well, which was babysitting. So that's how I ended up taking CPR. I do not remember the class. As far as the mannequins, I do remember the Annies. They were full body and they were heavy.
Do you remember, did she have breast?
No,
Hmm.
no breasts.
I do think it's interesting to note that the first mannequin was a female, but we're now having this big issue with a discrepancy between women receiving less bystander CPR because of our breasts. So I find that ironic and that they must have modified the anatomy somehow, or, a teenage girl or something. I'm gonna have to look into that. I digress. But so when did you realize that you could save a life with the CPR? Or I guess really once you take the class, you realize that, but you know, were you having discussions with people about it? Did it just come, to class? Were you exposed through any relatives or, how did you come to, I guess, value the CPR class?
I realized the significance and importance of CPR really during the respiratory therapy program training. As respiratory therapists, we have to go to all codes. And so as a student, I got to observe several cardiac emergencies.
Okay, well, tell me about that. Tell me about your later hospital experience as a respiratory therapist.
Well, as a respiratory therapist, I was fortunate enough to work. My first job was in an inner city, very busy hospital that had a life flight helicopter that would go out and, pick up victims of trauma or some type of accident. And that was really a learning ground. We often had to do, CPR in the emergency room and then place the person on a ventilator. And so I worked with all ages. One experience that I really remember is a little neonate that I think was about 24 weeks gestation. And I could actually hold the baby in the palm of my hand. And CPR was done on that baby. And the baby, of course, survived. And 4 months to 5 months later, I don't remember exactly, the baby actually went home. And so that was an experience that has stayed with me all these years. And it was just amazing to see how CPR could make that difference.
Aw.
Yeah.
So tell me about the inspiration or just getting the ideal to go from um teaching CPR to starting a CPR business. Tell me a little bit about your well, why don't you indulge us and tell us how you became a CPR instructor in the first place and how that led to you and your lovely daughter um starting a CPR business. I know she's lovely.
That she is. Well, let's take the first part of your question. What made me or how I became a CPR instructor?
Yeah.
I was working in a major healthcare system and they needed CPR instructors. So I decided to become a CPR instructor. And there, at that location, we would do employees. Okay, so had the experience of certifying new employees as well as recertifying, employees that were already certified. We also had an opportunity to participate in classes for the community, which I absolutely loved. Pregnant moms and their spouses, people that were babysitters, and then just people in the community that wanted to know how to perform CPR just in case. So I did that for several years and I loved it. But what I noticed is that in large crowds, people often are afraid to speak up when they don't know something, or if they have a question, they feel that they might be deemed stupid. And therefore, we didn't necessarily have a lot of participation. I also saw a lot of people fail. Surprisingly, they did not pass the course. So I decided that I would do or start a CPR business. And it would be most important to me that people felt comfortable enough to ask questions. It was important to me that a person truly understand why they're doing something. And I also wanted to offer flexibility because everyone doesn't work 8 to 5. So that training could be available in the evening, late evening, even. And also, you didn't have to have a lot of people. I would do a single person if need be. So that's what inspired me to start a CPR business is just the desire to want people to learn how to do CPR and to be comfortable when they learned and to feel confident that they would be able to perform when and if needed.
And that is beautiful. But what actually, I guess, led you to moonwalk off the cliff?
Well, to be honest with you, I had been thinking about doing a CPR business on my own for some time, but there weren't a lot of opportunities to start a CPR business. They didn't need training centers in my particular location. So, I just waited. And unfortunately, an event that occurred in 2009 with the passing of Michael Jackson, someone that I was truly a fan of, when he passed, and at first it was thought that he had passed from cardiac arrest. Didn't know the full story at that time. But because of that, I decided that it was time for me to moonwalk into the CPR business. And so I started it in September of 2009, the following month.
I hear a lot of but there was this lovely daughter who was along for the ride, supportive, 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 who moonwalked with you in her capacity as best she could, and then went on to become a CPR instructor like her mama.
Yes, that's true. I am very happy that you were willing and that you saw the benefit of becoming a CPR instructor, and more importantly, how you could teach others. And we both have the gift of gab and love to teach. So why not teach a life-saving skill?
I absolutely agree and definitely have been inspired by such, as I tell people a lot, it was like to me, at that time in our lives, especially with my, at that point in my life, I was coming out of a marriage, I hadn't really found my career niche, some of the things I had been doing, like public relations wasn't really public relationing, if you will, and to be able to do something, teach a skill, like it was just like kind of like spreading God's love because if I were to have sudden cardiac arrest, I'd want someone there who could save me. And the people who are going to be there may not be your loved ones, but I'd love to be able to help someone when they really need it and to teach that life-saving skill I thought was cool and be able to make my own schedule. So,
And
um,
I have to say that your marketing skills certainly came in handy. As I remember how we started out, actually going from business to business. One of us would go in and drop off the card and, answer any questions if they even gave us the opportunity to speak. Most people were receptive. And I remember that that was kind of fun. One of us would go in, like I said, the other would do the driving and write down, where we had been. And so it's just that basic marketing and getting out and spreading the word about the business. And we started. I think we had our first customer. What was it in January? We started in September, and we had our first customers in January. So that was not bad.
right, the same grassroots marketing. I did the same thing down here, and I can remember, just like you said, driving in, going in, giving the materials. If you got a chance to talk to somebody, but those customers definitely memorable because, that little CPR school and, working with those who, where English isn't necessarily
The
a
first
second.
language.
Yeah, it's not even a first. Maybe it might be a second or third. You know what I mean? Sometimes, and I think the anxiety that came with that for some of those students really motivated me to further make sure that I could create an environment that if you know your stuff, we're following the curriculum, of course, but I can create an environment where you're comfortable to show those skills and not be self-conscious because, maybe everything isn't perfect, but that we can, strive to achieve this goal and, get it accomplished. So
Yeah.
it definitely can be endearing. The other thing, you remember how we would put the mannequins and baby sleepers and the t-shirts for that more realistic effect?
Yeah, yeah. It was fun picking out those outfits.
Now, we don't have to as much because we've got clothes that are customized for the babies. But which brings
Exactly.
me up to our MCR medical. We talk about my marketing skills, but you meeting Karen Morrison, that was quite the relationship, rest her soul.
Yeah, it was very fortunate for me that I had met Karen, and I used to go and pick up the supplies that I ordered, or she would meet me somewhere and deliver them to me. And they actually started the business in their home and had like the warehouse in the garage. And they provided such good service that it didn't take very long before they grew. And just watching them grow, and they grew to the point of needing to move into a warehouse, office warehouse space. And so that was just wonderful to be able to have a place where I could go and get my supplies. And for a small business, because I couldn't necessarily always buy a lot in terms of the quantity, it was nice to be able to have MCR Medical where I could get what I needed. And then, like I said, to see how they have grown is just wonderful to see. You know,
It
great
is.
people.
They definitely are. It is, you know, I didn't realize then, of course, that they actually bootstrapped and, purchased their first warehouse to keep, finances down. And now, of course, I remember looking back, like I didn't know anything about their business plan. I just know that my supplies were in the mailbox, or you know what I mean, I had them, and I know that you know, I didn't always give the most leeway, time, like, oh no, I need supplies. And so I remember being able to get those things from them, you know what I mean, or in the mailbox and so forth. So then to reunite with Wes at the Life Saving Summit. And, now that Karen's gone, who, you knew, and to be able to hang out with Wes, who is definitely like a vivacious MCR medical representative. It was so cool to learn about things that they'd done and the ways they'd grown. And, to still have that same customer service out of a online distributor, so
Yeah.
it is amazing that the Life Saving Summit, I thought, bought them, kind of reacquainted us, and then on a different level, you know what I'm saying, to be able to um just talk CPR business at that level, to actually be in conversation about things like as far as product and opinions valued. It's just really
Right.
an upgrade, and to know that they listen to the things that we're saying, and they actually get with like Preston, and they, you know what I mean, find ways to kind of meet the needs. And to think that I've actually known them, you know what I mean, this whole time is like so cool to me, because how often does that happen? Like, I don't know the people who made my planner, I don't know the people who made this shirt, but to
Right.
be able to talk to people who are even distributing, you know what I mean, these things is just so cool. It's I don't know, it makes it deeply like sentimental for me.
Right. And it's nice to have that personal touch. Like I always used to say CPR training with the personal touch. And also, as you know, I lived down the street. I actually bought a house, and lo and behold, it was on the same street that they actually lived on. So at one point, we were down the street from one another.
Hmm.
So
Definitely.
that was awesome.
The house, that was down the street from them. And now I know, like I said, I took a lot for granted, but I do appreciate, them being around for me to order my Prestons, even after I ran away to, Florida, being able to have them ship stuff to me down here, and, just kind of continue that, and then to be reunited in a whole different space and on a different level, really, just kind of made that more personal. And just kind of with my development, I guess, as an instructor too.
Hmm.
Yeah, so now when you think back to the Annie mannequin and our, the mannequins now, what do you have to say kind of about mannequin evolution?
It's just been phenomenal, and it makes a big difference in the way uh, we teach and in the way that the student, I think, responds. We went from having the Annies that were, full body, and then harder. The skin was different, and we had to actually time the compressions. Okay. And so we've evolved to having softer material, lightweight mannequins that have feedback devices that can give that instant feedback to let a student know if they're compressing fast enough or deep enough. So that's been nice. Also having anatomical correctness, I guess is a way you could say that, has made it very nice in terms of teaching, um, doing CPR on a woman and, being careful. You didn't want to expose a woman's breasts. So it's nice to actually have the mannequin with the breast so it can be as realistic as possible. Um, it's also been nice to be able to watch on a little screen the depth and rate of compressions, depending on, you know, what you get. It's been nice having the feedback. And I think a person feels better knowing they're looking at what's going on, they're getting that instant feedback. Makes our job a lot easier.
Yeah, I definitely do. I definitely agree. You know how we like to say we like to role play in the classes. So I feel like they've definitely given like such great tools to be able to really paint a picture, to engage my students, so they won't say, no, I don't remember that class. They'll
Right.
definitely gonna remember. I do my best to bring a little bit of shock value or pizzazz. And I gotta say, having a mannequin with a bra on underneath the jacket is definitely a pause effect. People are like, what? I think you can see her in the background there. Um,
Yeah, yeah,
so
I do
yeah, them
see.
having to,
And what else has been nice is also having the different shades so that can represent different people. That has been one of the best things to me is to have the diversity with the
I was
mannequins.
I agree. And I was surprised, when I was at the cast, Dr. Abby Namath, she did a presentation and I was shocked to find out that so many people did not think that that was important to have mannequins that were representative of, different genders, colors, and ages even. And she showed that in her presentation with clips from like our CPR instructor groups, and she blurred out the names, but just showing people's comments of how it was that's not necessary, or why are we making it about this, that, or the other. And I was shocked that, just having the different representation could be viewed by some as a negative thing. I thought a blanket statement would be, an improvement, because definitely when dealing with women, just the hesitation that I see in my classes, warrants the need for people to be, introduced to the idea that your victim may have breast and you may have to manipulate the bra. I always used to talk about it in class, but definitely having something tangible there that you got to do something with. You know what I mean? It raises a question. Do I move the bra? Do I open the bra? I've had some
Mhm.
people zip the jacket back up. Like,
Yeah, makes a big difference.
it definitely does. So all in all, how do you think things have changed from your beginning time as an instructor to now, like, as an instructor, how have things evolved, or the biggest changes that you've noticed?
Well, for one, you know, students now have an opportunity to do a blended course so that they can self-pace themselves, and learn the material and then go at a later date to be tested for the skills. So that's a nice option for people. And of course, uh, some people don't ever want to go to a instructor-led course. But I think it's nice to have the option because some people prefer going to an instructor-led course. So I think it's very nice to have the option. to do it, part of it online, so you can take your time and pace yourself, fits into people's schedules, and then find a place to go and check off. But um, offering the instructor led, that's my favorite, of course, is instructing, leading the class. I think it's nice that we are also expanding the learning into schools and going out into the community. I'd like to see more community-based training, even something like, CPR parties, CPR festivals, things like that. I think it needs to become just something that you learn how to do. It's just such a valuable skill.
You know, I have to agree. And like when we started, well, when I joined you, because you obviously have been an instructor for, much of my childhood, and, it was something that you inspired me to do. When, we talked about having a business, it was like, of course, that was the coolest option. So I know I definitely supported your, vision for that. But there weren't a lot of other instructors. It was something that I was like the only one in the room besides you who was well, of course that kind of goes without saying, but when I'd go out, I didn't run into a lot of instructors, a lot. So there weren't like a lot of resources or things. And it was like there weren't a lot of ways to come together, which is why I love the Life Saving Summit, because at that point I became more aware of a lot of people who are really enthusiastic about CPR and the ideals, so you have the CPR AED rally and march, which is like what you said, like a CPR festival. You've got the Life
Mhm.
Saving Summit, which is really like CPR Christmas, as Miranda would say. Then you have the Cardiac Arrest Survivor Summit, which gives a different, opportunity there, because you have the survivors, which everybody may not be able to intermingle with the survivors if you're not a survivor. Um, Especially not on the level that I was blessed to be able to, but you've got the science there that you can geek out on because the AHA is doing their thing. And you also have, the vendors. So you have a lot of cool products, like the arm, the Defibutech arm, different AEDs, just it's a really great time. So, and then I haven't yet been, but I think it's called the Heart to Heart or something by Parent Heart Watch. And it brings together a lot of these people and motivations who are doing and reaching some of the needs, like you just said, more community outreach, more moving things to get into schools. Because a lot of these foundations and things, like the One Shot Foundation, In God's Hands, Every Second Counts, Heart Charge, these are all people who've experienced, sudden cardiac arrest or their loved ones, and then they wanted to do something about it and they wanted to act on that. So these events align, like allow us to get together. And that is something that I really appreciate, because it didn't seem like when we started, or when we started in the actual business portion, it didn't seem like there was a lot of others doing it too.
Yes, we certainly have to do a lot of educating, in certain areas to convince them or help them realize that CPR is an important skill. I was fortunate enough to go to a business where they had a person who had suffered from a cardiac arrest, sudden cardiac arrest. No one knew what to do, and they lost that person. And this was at a law firm, actually. And so, with one of my jobs where I worked at the hospital, I was sent out to the law firm, and I was able to teach them the very important life saving skill of CPR. But they also, at that time, purchased little oxygen devices, self contained, that they could have to be able to administer oxygen there in the field. And so it's it's something to try to convince, here you are, a lawyer, you're not thinking, oh, I need to learn CPR, but to show them that it is something that would be good for them because things like that unfortunate accident happened, you know. So it's just bringing more awareness to certain areas. It's nice now. I know different hotel chains are wanting to have CPR for their employees because they work with the public. And I think any area that you work with the public, you should probably know that very important skill. But you find that a lot of businesses don't want to take it on and they think it's a liability. So you have to convince them and show them how it's not a liability, so. And then we've also had, unfortunately, some incidents with public figures that have increased the awareness of CPR, So I think we're going to get there, slowly but surely. And then also, one area that's interesting is to be involved in getting some of the laws changed. There was a situation in Ohio where there was a sporting event, a young player had an incident, and even though the school had an AED, it was way across the field, locked up somewhere. No one had access. But anyway, this encouraged this young lady to go on and make sure that they had AEDs in the schools. So, you know, we're getting where we need to be slowly but surely.
Definitely, and it does seem, pretty slow when, people are being lost. And it is beautiful when people can join together because, I'm not exactly even sure which story you're speaking of, but definitely I can think of another instance in Ohio where that happened. The young man survived, but he has, what I mean, effects from an anoxic brain injury. I have another instance where the teenager he didn't make it, and they had AEDs, they had people who knew CPR, but their emergency plan, was not what it should be. And it's a shame that people are dying for us to get it right, but through this, loss, people are joining together, and it seems like these things are happening in different areas. We're just separated by location. And with technology and this, desire to unite and move forward, people are finding ways to connect and, get the message out. So I think, we are moving towards a place where, we'll see CPR in the schools, so it is a muscle memory, something, that's repetitive through legislature. And I'm learning a lot, like I said, just through others and stuff that they've done and fights that they've had. And, but it was like that with CPR in the beginning anyway, because, it was a struggle. And every time they made like advancements with, resuscitation breaths or rescue breaths, there's a while that's taboo. Does it really work? Is it better if we keep doing, these other, the like Nilger or Nilsen Holger Nilsen, techniques and these other things. And then defibrillation that had to go through, a few changes, and this shock here was too much shock. Okay, well, that was too much. Okay, we're going to modify this. And so it does seem like there's always a fight, and unfortunately, I guess because we're dealing with sudden cardiac arrest, sometimes people, leave others to carry on their legacy, and sometimes they can, carry it for themselves. So, but I think we're moving towards a time where the education, I think, at some point it'll be like, mathematics. Oh, we've got English class, we've got science class, we've got CPR training, we've got, health class.
Exactly. That is the goal, that it becomes common knowledge because, it can happen not just at a job, but, within your own household. So, to propel the industry forward, it's going to take a lot.
It is. It's definitely taken a lot. Well, I thank
Yeah.
you so much for spending this time with myself and the Wellness Pulse. Is there anything you'd like to add before we sign off today?
No,
Well, I thank you very much.
you're welcome. Thank you for having me. Bye bye now.
Thanks again for listening. If you or anyone you know needs to learn CPR, first aid, or a life saving skill, please contact People's Choice CPR and Safety. From CPR to self care, The Wellness Pulse is staying in rhythm with your well being. I'm Monica Stevens. Take care